Little announcements before we get to our agenda. First one, I hope that you guys who joined the AFN QL banquet, First Nations Women, Builders of Our Nations, had a good time. Reminder that the Circle of Trade closes at 1 p.m., so get your final shopping in, go create those links. And another short little message, the lost wallet that we mentioned yesterday still has not been recuperated. So last name Clark, it'll be available in 516C. I'm pretty sure you'll need it to get back home. We still have a lot of resolutions to go through today and a few guests that were invited. Yesterday we passed 11 resolutions and 1 was opposed, which means that we have 47 left for the day. As always, if ever you do have amendments to the different resolutions, please bring the language to our resolutions committee to help get things rolling for the day. I think it's important, there's a few situations yesterday to remind you that there is a code of conduct that you all signed to. Let's try to keep this day respectful, let's keep the language clean, and we'll have a better assembly if we do. And before we get started, I'd like to look towards our accessibility champion, Marsha Ireland, to come share a bit of the sign language with us this morning.
Yanko? Tehum, Dagwegum, Dayon, Miugets, Oneida Nation Turtle Clan. Hello, I am Marsha Ireland. I'm from Oneida Nation Turtle Clan. This morning we're going to review some signs. If you remember how to sign Sagoli, could you please, or hello, stand up and show me that sign. Sagoli, hello, hello. Do you recall that from yesterday and the day before? Sagoli, using your left hand, always on the left. Sagoli. Nagitwa. 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 In ASL, we would say bye or see you later. So Nagitwa. 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 Bianco. Bianco, Bianco, Bianco. In ASL, we would say thank you. Thank you. Also, Miigwech, we would sign this way. Miigwech, you're okay. And in the West Coast, we would sign it this way. I hope you've enjoyed the signs that I've taught you and reviewed over the last few days. If you would like to know more, please feel free to come and have a conversation with me. I appreciate the opportunities to be able to share with you our Indigenous sign languages, in particular the Oneida Sign Language. And I just want to highlight that we quite often speak about our languages, and we speak about... Sorry, the mic was buzzing. I apologize, everyone. Sorry, just making sure that the interpreter has the appropriate mic. So quite often when we think about languages, we think about spoken languages, and I just really want to emphasize the importance of our sign languages, and that, you know, each of us that has a each of our spoken languages has an equivalent sign language. So when we just to be mindful of that, and I know that there's a motion coming today in regards to language, and so just really wanting AFN and all of us to acknowledge the sign languages and acknowledging all of those people in our communities and their language and how they communicate with everyone. So, not to forget that. So it has been recognized in the legislation of our spoken languages as well as Indigenous sign languages, so it's important that we also do that, right? We want to be able to make our own choices and decisions when it comes to language, so we need to lead the way. So I hope that I appreciate your support and your time this morning. Yanko.
Thank you, Marcia Ireland, for that, and Deputy Parliament and your team. Just a shout out to our accessibility team. It is now 9:05 and the meeting is officially called to order, and I will now change over to my co-chair, Weena.
Good morning, bonjour, kwe everyone. So, the day 3 of this AGA, 45th AGA, AFN AGA, and we already, as you can see, we already have our first guest of the day. So, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre, leader.
Mr. Pierre Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre, le chef du Parti conservateur du Canada, qui est avec nous. And on that, just to explain you quickly, he's with us for a period of 30 minutes. So 30 minutes, as you all know, has been set aside on the agenda for that, and I'll be managing the time. We'll have time for some questions and answers. As you all know by now, it's not because you're up in line at the microphones that we'll have time to get to you, but we'll do everything possible to hear the most of you, and we'll take 3 chiefs first at once, and then we'll go back to Mr. Pierre Poilievre. So on that, I am going to invite him to come to the podium to address the Assembly. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, tout le monde.
Thank you very much, everyone. I am honored to have the occasion to be with you today on the occasion of the 45th Annual General Assembly of the AFN on the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation's traditional territory.
Of the AFN on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. And I'd like to thank your National Chief, Woodhouse, and members of the AFN, Chief in Assembly, youth, veterans, and those elders who have guided and prayed for a good assembly. Thank you in particular, National Chief, for inviting me here today, but also for taking the time to pray with myself and, more importantly, my wife Anna, and to remind both of us that there is a creator of all things who imparts wisdom and guidance that we should seek every single day. Wisdom also comes from those who came before us. and that, of course, includes our First Peoples, who have been here since time immemorial. I want to thank and honor you for bringing thousands and thousands of years of ancestral history to this Assembly. From this history flows the treaties and Section 35 constitutional rights, which recognize and affirm your rights and relationship with the Crown of Canada. As I was flying into Montreal, I looked down at the ground beneath, and I thought, it's easy to understand why you've chosen to gather in this particular spot. For thousands of years, when the rivers were the highways of this land, this was a place for people to meet and exchange goods and ideas. Just south of us, on the shores near Verdun, archaeologists have found artifacts going back 5,000 years, including copper that likely originated at Lake Superior, evidence of highly sophisticated trade networks that existed here and right across North America, supported by agreements between nations that facilitated a free enterprise that is as impressive as what we see today. This is my first meeting with you in person, but I hope it will be the first of many. I want the next generation of Canada and the next government that I hope to have the privilege to lead to build a genuine partnership with First Nations, a nation-to-nation relationship based on the recognition of rights and mutual respect. It may surprise some of you to learn that the values and institutions of your pre-colonial history that I described moments ago are shared by Conservatives. Values of faith and spirituality, values of acknowledging a higher creator, values of family as the greatest social safety net we have, values of tradition, the traditions, stories, and knowledge that are the foundation of any people, that form a long chain that connects one generation to the next, those that were, those that are, and those that will be, and makes each person understand that he is a part of something bigger than himself. Values of entrepreneurship, the kind of inventiveness and determination that allowed First Peoples to survive in this unforgiving land for millennia without today's comforts. Values of the land, an attachment to a place and a duty to harvest its bounty while passing it on pristine to those that follow. These Indigenous values, faith, family, work, tradition, entrepreneurship, and land will guide everything I do as Prime Minister. But let me be clear, I'm not here to run your life. I don't want to run anybody's life. I want to run a small government with big citizens, free to make their own decisions and live their own lives. This is especially true for First Nations peoples. Every one of you in this room is a leader. Every one of you knows your communities better than Ottawa does, and certainly better than I do. You draw on thousands of years of experience, while Canada has only been here for a century and a half. That's why we will get the government gatekeepers, the federal government gatekeepers, out of your way so you can do what's best for your members. My promise to all Canadians is that a common-sense Conservative government will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. This is my general commitment, but it is of particular importance to First Peoples. Axe the tax means cancelling a carbon tax that is making food and groceries more unaffordable for everyone, but especially for First Nations people. Because of the remote and colder weathers that you must confront, this tax is particularly cruel and unjust, and that is why I support the Chiefs of Ontario and their judicial review to counter this unjust tax burden. But I have good news. When I am Prime Minister, the Chiefs of Ontario will not have to spend any more money on lawyers because I will axe the tax, and when I say it, I mean it. Build the homes. We need to make it easier for you to provide your housing for your people. I know that the demand for housing among your members has grown faster than supply because the federal government has consistently failed your communities by raising the cost of construction with layers of bureaucracy and pricing you out of the housing market on your own land. Common Sense Conservatives will work to cut red tape in Ottawa and create new financing and mortgage options that make buying, building, and renovating homes more affordable. Stop the crime. We need to stop the crime everywhere, but we also need to acknowledge that there has been a particular problem with crime in rural and remote communities since 2015. And part of this is that the federal government has not provided adequate or competent policing. We need to fix that by cooperating with First Nations leaders and looking at new models that allow you to chart your own course on policing if you so choose. And I've been happy to discuss these matters with your national chief. We need to cut off the flow of illicit drugs and gang activities that threaten communities. We also need to stop Justin Trudeau's wacko policies of legalizing drugs and leaving addicts at the mercy of predatory drug dealers. It means turning hurt into hope by building recovery centres, using traditional Indigenous knowledge and healing traditions to give addicts the help they need to break the cycle of drug use and heal their bodies and minds. I've also discussed with the National Chief ways that we can improve policing by removing bureaucracy and giving more autonomy to local communities who want it. And fix the budget. It means cutting waste in Ottawa and putting power back in the hands of local leaders and the common people of Canada. There's so much untapped potential in this country. So much of that potential resides in your nations and communities. For too long, you've been held back by a broken system that takes power away from you and places it in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats in Ottawa. That's why I'm committed to ending the Ottawa knows best paternalistic system. As you know, the Indian Act puts reserve land and money in the hands of the federal government, which means you often have to go to Ottawa to ask for tax revenues collected from resource development on your very own lands. No other government has to do that. The result is that money is wasted on paperwork, and there's less left over for the good projects that you seek to advance in your own communities. My goal is to reduce the bureaucracy and simplify the funding for your nations. One way to do that could be by converting more of the project-by-project grants into predictable funding streams that you can count on and borrow against for major capital projects without endlessly filling out forms or waiting for answers from Ottawa. That is also why Common Sense Conservatives support the First Nations resource charge that will allow you to take back control of your resource money that is rightfully yours. This is a first. Thank you. Although I don't deserve the applause, this was a First Nations developed idea. I simply came along and accepted it, put it in my platform. You all did the hard work of developing this idea. I'm simply here to follow your marching orders and make it happen. It's a completely optional model that will simplify negotiations between resource companies and First Nations, so that you don't have to waste years on endless negotiations reinventing the wheel every time there's a new project. It will be a very simple to administer program. Here's how it works. First Nations can collect taxes from resource companies, and those companies will get a 50% refundable tax credit from the federal government that will vacate the space and make it economically viable for them to do so. This new approach will mean the money goes directly to you rather than from the community to the federal government and then all the way back. It would not actually stop you from also signing impact benefit agreements or making other arrangements that are already available to you. The choice would be yours and the option would be on the table. It would put you back in charge of your money. It will mean less waste in Ottawa and more money for your communities. And that money will mean powerful paychecks, services, training, clean drinking water, and economic opportunity. I've made no secret about my desire to see more economic growth and development. I talk about it everywhere. It will give people better jobs, more opportunities, and powerful paychecks. And all that depends on economic growth. That means listening to you when you have concerns about projects, yes, but it also means listening to you when you support development, and especially when your members and your leaders and are partners in those projects. If reconciliation means anything, it means saying yes to economic opportunities that First Nations are asking for. Yet this federal government has repeatedly shut down projects that have the support of strong majorities of local First Nations, almost never with proper consultation beforehand. That is unacceptable. When your future is at stake, your right to say yes is as important as your right to say no. And when you think about it, I believe in Section 35 consultation rights. I believe those rights require our government consult with people who want projects to go ahead as well as those who do not want them to go ahead. When this government killed the Tech Frontier Mine, a $20 billion project, it didn't consult with all the surrounding First Nations that supported the project, nor has it properly consulted with the many First Nations in Northern Ontario that want the Ring of Fire, but can't get it because we have a wacko environment minister who doesn't want to grant a permit to build a road to get there. You know, we need to get the federal government to consult with you on your opinion, even when that opinion is yes. And this is important because we've seen the successes that can happen when we say yes. The LNG Canada project, a $40 billion project, initiated by former Haisla Chief Councillor Ellis Ross. This is the single biggest construction project in Canadian history, and I'm very proud that Ellis Ross will be a candidate for the Common Sense Conservatives and a member of Parliament after the next election. The Haisla Nation is also pushing ahead with a $3.28 billion Cedar LNG project. The Inuk Cree is building under the leadership of then Chief Billy Morin, who's also a Common Sense Conservative candidate running in the next election, is building the first surgical centre on reserve in Canada, which will provide revenue for his people and care for all Albertans. The Mi'kmaq First Nations have shown that First Nations traditional knowledge can be used in food and the production of nutritious foods by purchasing Clearwater seafoods in Nova Scotia. And my personal favorite, the Squamish in BC are building 6,000 housing units on 10 acres of land. Now this is right inside Vancouver. It never would have happened, by the way, if the decision was left to Vancouver City Hall, because their gatekeepers would have dragged it out forever and blocked it from happening. We're seeing more and more First Nations communities are more open for business, more progressive in getting things done than their neighbouring municipalities. I spoke to an investor here in Montreal who said he planned to invest in the city of Calgary, but all the bureaucracy and the cobweb of confusion at City Hall there blocked him. So he went next door to Susina, and he said it was the best place to do business he's ever been, and so he's investing his millions there. This is a real opportunity. The incompetence and obstructiveness of municipal governments will provide a competitive advantage to those First Nations communities who open the door to business and create opportunity for their people, and I can't wait to facilitate that with you. Those are just a few examples of First Nations entrepreneurship and initiative, but there are countless others that we need to pursue. The reality is, we don't have billions. We have trillions of dollars of resource wealth right beneath our feet. That wealth belongs, in many cases, to you and your communities. Your children can be the richest in the world if we unleash these opportunities. And that's why we will be laser focused on economic growth and opportunity for First Nations. But I also know that there's more to reconciliation than that. For many decades, your cultures, your languages, and your way of life have been silenced and sidelined by the federal government. Just a couple of years ago, the federal government tried to pass a law banning hunting rifles. This would have effectively criminalized the traditional way of life of your communities. Common Sense Conservatives thank the AFN for standing up and defending the rights of your people and all people to own hunting rifles and harvest the land responsibly. And we will continue to do that. Protecting and preserving history, culture, and tradition are the bedrock of Conservative values. Common Sense Conservatives will support you and your knowledge keepers to keep customs, traditions, and history alive, to pass your stories on to your children and grandchildren, and to better educate all Canadians. The story of Indigenous people in this land from time immemorial is one of strength and resilience, and it includes your great contributions to building and defending the country that we share today. Indigenous soldiers have served with distinction in every war in which Canadians have fought, from 1812 to First World War, Second World War, Korea, and most recently Afghanistan. At Queenston Heights, 300 Mohawk warriors under the leadership of Chiefs John Norton and John Brandt led an early assault that broke the spirits of the American invaders. At Vimy Ridge, Indigenous marksmen and infantrymen helped Canada win the victory that defined us as a country in the eyes of the world. This history is rightly a source of pride for your members, and it should be known by all Canadians. I don't believe in canceling or denying history, but I do believe in telling the whole story. For me, that means adding more names and more stories and more voices to our national narrative. Canadian school children should know about the pain, but also the pride of the First Nations people. Figures like Thanel Delther, Chief Poundmaker, Chief Crowfoot, Catherine Sutton, Joseph Brandt, Tommy Prince, and Mary Two Axe Early should be as familiar as the European names that used to exclusively fill our textbook. The heroism of First Nations should be known by all. Turning from the past to the future, Common Sense Conservatives will partner with you as you write new stories for your people, new stories of growth and prosperity, of dignity and self-determination, of healing and revival. This means that education resources and facilities have to match the high ambition of your children, especially in northern and remote communities that have been deprived of resources and opportunities for too long. The federal government can help with this, but it can't do it alone. So I issue a challenge to the CEOs in the towers around this building to train Indigenous youth and give them the opportunities. Before these CEOs think to fly in foreign workers to fill job opportunities, they should first and foremost be offering those jobs to Indigenous youth. Thank you. I know that the relationship between First Nations and the federal government has been painful and destructive because of the federal government's terrible decisions. For decades, the residential school system removed children from the love and care of their families. It was a monstrous abuse of excessive governmental power that cut your children off from their cultures, languages, and traditions. In many cases, students were neglected and abused. Tragically, too many young children never came home. Those were terrible crimes by a big and imposing government against each victim and against your communities. In 2008, the federal government, under then Prime Minister Harper, issued an apology and launched the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But there is more work to be done. I know that Canada has no future without a strong future for the First Nations people. As Justice Lamar of the Supreme Court said in the Delgamuukw case, we are all here to stay. All of our futures are intertwined, like the small rivers that flow into the St. Lawrence to make a great highway of prosperity. What each of us brings to the table will combine to bring the success of all of us. I am here as Prime Minister in its proper meaning. It means first servant. That is my job, to be a servant of all the people and to be a partner to the First Nations. I know that it won't be easy. We won't always agree. And you've heard enough promises and enough performative reconciliation. Well, we need our honest and direct conversations and a partnership based on a nation-to-nation relationship and mutual respect. I come here to offer that respect in total humility and thank you for your immense contributions as we move forward together with your values and to unleash the potential of all Canadians. Thank you very much. Would you like me to sit down?
Merci, Monsieur le chef du Parti conservateur.
Thank you, Mr. Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, for this address to the Assembly.
we have 10 minutes in front of us for this Q&A session. And as agreed with Mr. Poilievre, we will take one chief at a time, so one person at the microphone, and we'll go back to Mr. Poilievre. So once again, it's not a guarantee that we will get to you with the time allowed and the time we have. And I will suggest to be concise and brief. That way, we will be in a position to hear the most of you. So, on that, microphone number 1, please state, if you can please state your name and nation. Over to you.
Honey, good morning. Rachel Mendo Bindishnikas, Wikwem Kong Benjaba, Gimakwe Odindao, Makwadodem, Andan Matkwe Digo. Migwech in the Gabajain. Ni Quikwedgman. Mandini, Gekagam Gong, or the Wikwem Kong, Ni, Danini, Binjandama, Subbondashni, Mandani, Council Ishnikazat, Gigdonanino, Kmino Gigdo Quelk, Gitchinaki Tada Manda, Ni the Schmabak Chigama, Migwetugo Ka Ekadat, Minoshni, Bedadze, Mandani King, Wijnad Mad.
Other infrastructure. It seems to me that we need to simplify and streamline and leave you to make your own decisions with the federal transfers being predictable, generous, and monetizable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So we will now go to the microphone number 2, please.
Thank you. My name is Marcel Head. I'm the Chief of Shoal Lake Nation. I really enjoy listening to what you had to present here, Mr. Poilievre. But you got to realize, that Ottawa has a whole list of policies and legislations that dictates as to what we can and cannot do. You have to make changes within Parliament to make sure that bureaucracies does not stand in the way of our efforts in determining our self-determination, self-government. We talk about government to government, nation to nation discussion on self-government, but it's just not there. I told the minister yesterday, it's just not there. But we have a process that I've introduced, with your predecessor, Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I had the privilege to meet with him, and I told him, in order to right the wrongs of Canada, the injustices that have been done to us as a people of first people in Canada, I told him, you have to go back to the original, the spirit and intent of treaty, because there is a process that you need to understand. The day before treaty, the day of treaty, the day after treaty, there was a process that was missed. You see, right after the day of treaty, the treaty was taken to Ottawa, and the government of the day said, we have the land, we have access to the resources. That was wrong. That was the injustice that was done to our people. Right after that, governments of the day started legislations, policies, that removed First Nations out of the picture totally. See, when I explained to Stephen Harper, that agreement, the treaty agreement, meant to share the land, to share everything. One prospers, the other partner was to equally benefit from the resources. And we can go back to that by listening, that Ottawa needs to listen to our process. Today, I present to you a win-win situation. Right now, within that self-government, we take back what is rightfully ours, the land and the resources. We take it back, but only this time. We're not going to break our own treaty, but we are going to enhance, a process where everybody wins. Like in terms of the process, the forestry, for example, a company within our traditional territory is prepared to do business with Shoal Lake Nation and Red Earth. I'm not going to name the particular company, but they're ready and prepared to do exactly what should have been done the day after treaty. So industry right now is waiting for First Nations to take back what is rightfully theirs, and that's the land and the resources. Today, if we were to discuss mutual benefit agreements, there's a three-way that profits could be split. 1/3 to Canada, 1/3 to the companies, and 1/3 to the First Nations. I think that's a win-win situation. And even the royalties, But with that, with the short time that we have, I want to invite you to Saskatchewan and provide us an audience with you. It's kind of pointless, to come here and having to have 4 minutes in the, with the speakers here. And that's disgusting. But today, I invite you to Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Well, Chief, I agree with everything you said. This idea that Ottawa's bureaucracy and politicians can manage First Nations people is not only paternalistic and insulting, but it's proven wrong. I mean, what does the bureaucracy in Ottawa have to teach you about good management? The amount of money that's being wasted in our nation's capital. The only thing I disagree with you on is you say that it should be 1/3 for the government, 1/3 for the community. I don't think the federal government should get 1/3. I think it should get a lot less than 1/3. If the resources are developed in your land you should get the money. The workers and the businesses that invest should get the money. We don't need the money to go to Ottawa, where it will be squandered on bureaucracy. My goal is to streamline, get the bureaucracy out of your life, have predictable funding flows so you can manage your future, and let you keep your own source revenues, including through a First Nations resource charge, so that when this forestry company does harvest timber on your land, they pay the benefits to you first, and then your community can be the first to benefit from it. I don't want to run your life. I want to run a small and competent government that stays out of your way and lets you fulfill your full potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to microphone number 1, please.
Judy Wilson. My traditional name is Red Hummingbird Woman. I'm from unceded territory of the Secwepemc Ulu. I just wanted to say thanks to the ancestral lands, the people here, but I also want to recognize our veterans who stood with their back to you. That should be acknowledged.
Thank you.
And our LGBTQAA+, because in your speech, you did not acknowledge missing murdered women. You did not acknowledge the United Nations. You did not acknowledge the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You did not acknowledge the inherent title rights where my people come from. A majority of our province are inherent title and rights. It's treaty rights and constitution rights, but it's also inherent title and rights. So if you fail to recognize that, you need to educate yourself on that. So the other part is that you also failed to recognize our residential school survivors, who is a real live issue. If you're working to be the next Prime Minister in Canada, it tells me you have a lot of education to do in those fronts. And coming here and not acknowledging it is a first step that you need to do. And also, one of the biggest things is our children and our families. And I want to also say, underscore climate change. I did not hear anything about the climate crisis, climate change issues. There's a hurricane in the town right now from the remnants from Burrell. How can we dismiss climate crisis? It's real, it's happening. We have heat domes people are dying from. We have wildfires. That has to be one of your top agendas, not just the economy and business to Canada. You have to address the climate crisis. But I want to share my time with Mary TG that talk about the children and family. That's so important, and that's what we're dealing with today.
Thank you, Chief. Mary TG, Chief Proxy, Tackla Nation. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge my sister's words, and I just wanted to reference your saying that Harper apologized. We endured the worst 10 years ever under the Harper Conservative government. An apology without actions, an apology without money to back it and to make fundamental change are just hollow words in the wind. And we want to ensure that what we endured under the Harper regime, we won't go through that with you. So what assurances can you give us? I want to also ensure that under the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, it was a hard-fought battle that we won, and it proved Canada discriminated against First Nations children. I want to ensure that you are going to honor any of the final settlement agreements that we have come to ensure that there is discrimination has in fact truly ended and will never happen again. So I would like to understand how you're going to do that, to make us a clear plan and to ensure that the resources, the billions of dollars that we fought for is going to be protected. And again, I must say that I haven't heard anything that talks about our social agenda. We talked about economic development. I just want you to know that the way that we are right now in Tackla is that our children, our people, our lands will not be commodified, and that we are the true, to understand what inherent right means. I am hereditary chief. I am the Section 35 rights holder. So I think you need to really, again, educate yourself for that. And again, to have a really clear plan to ensure how's your government going to ensure that no longer will our women ever go missing and go murdered again. So we need to hear clear plans. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. A lot of different issues you raised. On the issue of the climate, our belief is the best way to tackle the issue of climate change is through technology and not taxes. Taxes are not working. They are impoverishing our people. They are making it more expensive for people, particularly who live in rural and remote communities. We need to unleash the production of clean, emissions-free energy. That includes nuclear, hydroelectric, and other forms, but to do that, we need to speed up the approval process to get these things built. That will bring down costs, but also bring down emissions. On the issue of discrimination, our party has been clear when it comes to children's services. Our party has been clear that we support Jordan's principle and that we will give equal treatment and we will support a redress of past injustices and discrimination in child services. You know, we will continue to work with you to resolve the other outstanding issues that you raised. And we believe that economic reconciliation is part of social progress. We need jobs and opportunity for First Nations communities that will ultimately give people a chance to escape poverty and to provide resources for clean water, for education, for health, and for other basic necessities. Both of those things have to go hand in hand. Social support requires economic reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So last speaker, so the last 4 minutes, you make it the time you want to, if you want to share your time, but over to microphone number 2, please.
Morning. My name is Sheldon Sunshine. I'm the Chief of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and what is now known as Alberta Treaty Territory. I applaud the questions that came up this morning. Those were what I was going to cover. But when we're talking about treaty and partnership, I want to understand how are you going to implement that? We have been good treaty partners in Treaty 8. We allowed the colonizations of our lands, and yet we are sitting in probably the poorest nations in this country. And how are we going to address that? I think if you were able to come and speak to all the chiefs in Treaty 1 through 11 to talk about the historic treaties and how that path forward is going to be done. And all of our issues that we have, we got poverty, we got drugs, all of it, everything included, is all tied to our treaty. You know, uphold the treaty obligations that the Crown promised to each of our nations when we signed treaty. And I think that'll be a big step towards reconciliation. You know, I heard that the government of Canada is prosperous, that Alberta is having billions. Last year there was $30 billion in tax royalty revenue, several billion going to Canada, yet we got people living on the streets, as we heard chiefs here yesterday. I have people living on the streets in poverty. So I think having those conversations, meaningful dialogue with your government should you get in, and I'll leave it at that. I would like an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So we'll go with Grand Chief Cody Daibo, host nation. Thank you.
So first off, I'm going to start off with a statement in case you're not aware. Today is July 11th. This is the anniversary of the 1990 Oka crisis, where we know what happened, where your government marched troops into your allies' lands. There still has never been an apology about that or any movement going forward. So if your government is committed to repairing the relationships with First Nations, then I would ask you to start using the White-Montour decision rather than the Sparrow and Vanderpeet test, which keeps First Nations people frozen in time. We're not some ancient piece of history. We can advance as well together. So those things need to start happening if we want true reconciliation, where we can start taking a hold of our own fate rather than putting it in the hands of the Superior Court or Supreme Court of Canada. So just wanted to say that.
Miigwech, Grand Chief. Over for the conclusion, final remarks, Monsieur Poilievre.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that is exactly the partnership that I propose. to put you back in control of your decisions and your destiny. I agree with you that there has been a paternalistic top-down relationship, an Ottawa knows best approach that has held back your communities and prevented you from passing on your traditions and your knowledge, your language, and your prosperity to your people. And that needs to change. We need to have a real partnership based on a nation-to-nation relationship and mutual respect. We won't agree on 100% of issues, but we will work together in a respectful way, and the promises that I make will be realistic ones that will actually be fulfilled. I restate what I said in my remarks, that I respect and will uphold the treaties and Section 35 rights, and this will be the foundation of a successful relationship that is built upon mutual trust. So I want to thank all of you for your candor, your direct approach, and for continuing to educate me and all federal representatives on how we can go forward in a true partnership to the benefit of all of our people. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, sir. Pierre Poilievre, Chief Head of the Conservative Party.
Thank you, chiefs and proxies that had time to come to the microphone.
Thank you.
I'm sure. I'm sorry, we need to be recognized first at the microphone, and we have our guests waiting, already waiting since 15 minutes now. Thank you, chiefs. Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur Pierre Poilievre. On that, I will now turn the floor over to my colleague for the next topic on the agenda for our next guest. Thank you so much, everyone.
So we will continue our morning of discussions with some of the federal parties of opposition. On continue maintenant nos discussions avec.
We will continue our conversations with opposition parties from the federal government, and we will now welcome the chief of the NDP party,
Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh.
Jagmeet Singh.
Thanks so much. Thank you all. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank Véronique Picard, the Youth Council co-chair. Bonjour, Anine, Tante. Je tiens d'abord à souligner que
I want to underline that the lands that we are gathered on are part of an unceded traditional territory of the Mohawk population that has served as a location of gathering between nations.
First of all, it's a really huge honor for me to be here. I take the opportunity to be able to address the AFN General Assembly like this as a huge honor. It's something that I feel very special that I've been allowed to speak to you all. And I want to start off with some thank yous, because there's a lot of important people in this room I want to thank. First of all, I want to thank your National Chief Cindy Woodhouse. You have a very important role, lots of responsibility, and I thank you for all the hard work. I want to thank the elders and knowledge keepers. It's so important for us to honor the elders, to honor knowledge keepers, their knowledge, their wisdom, and I want to thank them. At the same time, I also want to thank the youth. The youth are not just our future, they're our present. I want to thank the youth that are here as well. I want to thank the veterans for your sacrifice and your service. And of course, I want to thank the chiefs. Each one of you has a very important role in your communities, lots of responsibilities, and you do a very important work, and I want to thank you for that hard work. Merci encore, c'est vraiment un honneur pour moi.
Thank you. It is a great honor to be here with you, truly.
I've talked with many of you, and I've heard you loud and clear. You continue to face significant injustice and human rights violations, frankly. You're denied basic human rights. You've shared with me your concerns about overcrowding in your communities, of homes that are in deplorable conditions, dilapidated, and how this is a result of decades of underfunding by both Liberal and Conservative governments. I've heard from you that even if homes are doubled in community, doubling the number of homes in community would still not be enough to meet the needs. I've heard from you about your concerns about not having access to clean drinking water, something that is so obviously a fundamental right that continues to be denied. And your concerns that these very substandard living conditions are a result of underfunding. I've heard from you that you feel abandoned in the fight against the climate crisis. You've been left to deal with the impacts of that on your own, and many of your communities are amongst the hardest hit by climate crisis. I've heard from you that Indigenous women and girls are getting murdered at a rate 6 times higher than non-Indigenous women and girls, and this is so fundamentally wrong. All of this, all these things I've outlined are the results of colonialism and genocide, and it has to end. Nine years ago, you were promised real change. Trudeau made a lot of promises. Lots of promises. Promised to lift long-time standing long-term boil water advisories by March of 2021, and he broke that promise. Today, there are still 28 boil water advisories in effect, and dozens of communities that can't trust their water even though they don't even have an advisory. I've been to Niskandiga, and Niskandiga is one of those communities that has had a boil water advisory for 29 years. You've got people that have grown up never knowing what it's like to be able to turn on the tap and get clean water.
They promised to actually implement the 94 call to action. They only realized 13 and not even one last year. So he promised to invest in shelters for women and for Indigenous women, and
But sadly, I think it's all been just for show. One example, our teammate, one of our New Democrat MPs, Leah Gazan, tried to include free prior informed consent in the Canada Early Learning and Childcare Act, and the Liberals voted against it. I feel like Justin Trudeau only shows up when it's good for him. So I completely understand those who are frustrated by this government. I am too. I see the power that they have and the ability they could have used to use that power to make things better, and they've refused to do so. So it is clear in the next election we need change. But people will have to choose what type of change they want. And I feel, for Indigenous people, it's clear where Pierre Poilievre stands. He has promised so-called economic reconciliation, but he voted against harmonizing Canada's laws with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Not once, but twice. So for him, economic reconciliation doesn't mean respecting your fundamental rights. Because ultimately, he doesn't want you to have free, prior, and informed consent. What he really wants is for his rich developer buddies to get richer off of your resources, and he doesn't want you to make the decisions. And I think that's wrong. For him, it means cutting services, cutting funding for Indigenous health and Indigenous services. He talks a lot about freedom. But what he really wants is freedom for himself. For him, when he says freedom, freedom means not respecting treaty obligations. For him, freedom means not respecting your rights. For him, freedom means not getting your free, prior, and informed consent. After all, he's the guy that said Indigenous people need a stronger work ethic, not compensation for the atrocities committed in residential schools. All right? He's a guy that said that chiefs like you have too much power. That's literally what he said. He's a guy who speaks to anti-Indigenous organizations very recently, not years ago, but very recently, denying the truth of residential schools. He's a guy who right now has let a very well-known residential school denier, Aaron Gunn, run for his party. That's who he really is. When someone shows you who they are, you got to believe them, especially when they show you again and again and again. Il ne fera jamais ce qu'il faut pour...
He will never do what needs to be done for justice to be given to the indigenous population. He will reduce her services and make you responsible for the difficulty you have to live through.
Economic reconciliation means. For us, economic reconciliation cannot happen unless it means respecting your rights to free, informed, prior consent. It means that you make decisions on your lands, on your territories, with your resources. You are in control of your destiny. It means upholding your rights to housing, clean drinking water, and all of the human rights that have been so long violated. That's what New Democrats are fighting for, and that's what we will continue to fight for. Just recently, Leah Gazan worked hard to have the House of Commons in support of all New Democrats. We pushed to make sure we recognize the genocide happening against Indigenous people. We also worked to ensure that the Red Dress Alert pilot project is being launched to keep Indigenous women and girls safe. Yeah. As a team, we are fighting to make sure we find every opportunity to include informed prior consent in legislation, including the national childcare legislation. Our team supports our Indigenous MPs like Leah, who is a fierce leader in ensuring women and children are lifted up. Her bill on guaranteed livable basic income is gaining ground, and we support her work. Another one of our teammates, Lori Idlout, is working to ensure First Nation rights are upheld. She's making sure to have legislation that returns jurisdiction to First Nations. She's working to close the infrastructure gaps, to protect Indigenous languages, to ensure First Nations have safe and affordable housing and funding for Indigenous policing. All of our teammates, but I'll shout out a couple of them in particular, Blake Desjardins, Nikki Ashton, Charlie Angus, Taylor Backrack, Gord Johns, Carol Hughes, and Rachel Blaney are names that I'm sure you know in your communities. These are folks that have fought very hard for your rights to be upheld. Every one of us, all New Democrats, unequivocally, are using our power to add our voice to yours, to force government to do the things they would not have done otherwise. You might have heard recently, in face of that $350 billion infrastructure gap, the Liberals chose now as a time to also bring in billions in cuts to the services you rely on. Well, I made it clear that that was wrong, and we forced the Liberals to reverse those cuts. I know you are fighting every day for your rights to be respected. I believe it's time for you to have a government that truly respects you. When I was a kid, my mom taught me this teaching that's very important in the Sikh tradition, in my tradition, that we are all one. And she would say that when we look at the people around us, we have to imagine that that's us, that we are all connected so deeply that we are literally one people. And it means that if anyone around us, as a kid, my mom really enforced and taught me this repeated this again and again, put a lot of emphasis on this, that if any one of us are hurting, we're all hurting. But if we lift the people up around us, if we lift the people that are in our communities, that are in our neighborhoods, that are all around us, if we lift the people up, we all rise together. That's why I'm in politics. I want a Canada where we all rise together, where we lift each other up, all of us. I believe we can build a country where we have more time for joy and less worry, where we have more hope and less fear, where we have more justice and more compassion and less greed. I want to work with you, truly work with you, in a true nation-to-nation relationship to ensure that all communities have safe housing and good infrastructure, clean water, that we use Indigenous knowledge to fight against climate change and protect our land, water, and air. We want to ensure that everyone has access to Indigenous health care, high-speed broadband, and Indigenous policing that's properly funded. I want to work with you to finally put an end to the genocide against Indigenous women. I want to make sure that all the TRC calls to action and all of the MMIWG calls to justice are implemented once and for all. I want to make sure your inherent and treaty and First Nations rights are upheld. And I want to make sure that the federal government provides adequate support to First Nations so that you can make contributions to the Canadian economy and lead healthy and prosperous lives. Together, I believe we can rebuild First Nations capacity and support Indigenous-led institutions so we can walk together, so we can work together to lift up First Nations, to amplify your strengths and ensure your knowledge is a part of the decisions impacting your own lives. No more empty promises. In the next election, you've got a choice between Liberals who've let you down, Conservatives who want to cut and gut the services you rely on and who continue to deny your truths, or New Democrats who are fighting for your rights, who are standing with you, shoulder to shoulder, and walking towards a true nation-to-nation relationship. Lors des prochaines élections, vous pouvez choisir.
During the next election, you can always elect a government that really want to build nation-to-nation relationship.
Fighting for justice for Indigenous people. I know that these assemblies are very important opportunities to align priorities, but know this, the NDP is here for you. We will always be here for you. During the next months, I hope to visit more of your communities as my commitment to learn how to better work with you continues. I want to thank you again for all the great work you do, and I want you to know you can count on me as an ally, as someone that wants to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in building that brighter future together. Merci. Thank you. Miigwech. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jagmeet Singh. We now have time for a few questions. I remember you that we don't have a lot of time, so if from the beginning you can remember that, and if you don't need all your time for your questions, you can already from the beginning share your time with your colleagues in the line behind you. So I will start with the mic on number 1.
When Zoom and question is quenched. Good morning and thank you, Jagmeet, for attending, and thank you for your words. Regrettably, we didn't get a chance to hold Paul over the barbecue any longer than we could, but I'll ask you the same question, but I already have heard you answer this to me in the past. I'm hoping that you will denounce and force the other governments to denounce the doctrine of discovery. We've asked the Pope to do it. The Pope won't do it. I'm hoping that you'll start there. If we start there, then a lot of the things that were discussed earlier will help. And I just wanted to say that. So, and also the unleashing of the opportunities for us. Some of our nations want our land left exactly the way they are. We know the resources are in our backyard. We want to be able to say no. And we don't have that option right now. So, Cook's Jim.
Direction 1 and Jawan Quest Lease Behan Cook Bevan Sletku in the Cup Nation, BC. I remember speaking to you when you first came to the AFN, and I asked a commitment from you to come to BC and speak with the BC chiefs and to meet with the Nicola 5. I extend that invitation back to you again, and hopefully I hear back from you. Kukshem.
You can continue with one more question.
Thank you, Speaker. Chief Bruce Atkinson, Martin Falls First Nation. I wanted to ask, with the flowery words with Jagmeet, I just wanted to know, he stands with the Liberal government today to promote more of the status quo on Indian Act policy and how it deprives our communities of growth. In my community, we had no growth for over 20 years. No growth plan, no supports from the Liberal government, yet his party continues to uphold the Liberals and their power. Jagmeet, your power has the power to change this, but still more of the status quo for First Nations on reserve and no growth in terms of housing. Infrastructure is badly needed, and you can not only fix the water, but you could also fix the infrastructure that's needed. My community is closest to the Ring of Fire. That's our traditional land. We're working with the provincial government to make changes, but the federal government is reluctant to do so. You need to come to the table, Jagmeet, with your buddy Pierre, not Pierre, but with Justin, and move things along for First Nations in the North. Yet you don't seem to do so. You stay in Ottawa and promote more of the status quo for First Nations. Now is the time to act, Jagmeet, and promote a good future for our youth and our communities. And we don't need more flowery words. We need action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chiefs, for your questions. We will now let Mr. Singh answer.
Thank you so much. I'll start off with the first question on the doctrine of discovery. Inherently a racist doctrine. Of course, I denounce it. There is no way that makes any sense. It denied the reality of Indigenous people. And yes, I wholeheartedly denounce the fundamentally racist belief. And the chief also asked, thank you, the chief also asked, what free, prior, informed consent means. What the United Nations Declaration means is that Indigenous communities can say yes or no to projects. That's what it should be, fundamentally. And Indigenous communities should be able to make that decision. And they should be able to make that decision meaningfully. And that we need to work in collaboration as nation to nation, as partners. And whether that means in protecting the land, whether that means in moving forward with a project, whatever that means, it means that Indigenous communities are at the table making those decisions. And I can say that with full confidence, I believe in that. That's what I believe in, that if we want to see growth or development, it has to happen with Indigenous communities. If Indigenous communities want to go a different path, that is also their right, and we have to work together for that. Thank you. The Chief, BC Chiefs Lees Bahan invited, again, extended an invitation. We will definitely follow up with you, Chief. I hope I can get someone from my team to get your contact right now, and I'll try our best to follow up with that. I want to meet with as many Indigenous leaders and communities as I can, and so thank you for that invitation. And then the last question, I think it's something on people's minds, so I appreciate the question from the Chief. I've shared with you that I am frustrated with the current government, and there will be an election, and people will have a choice in that election. What we've done often, and this is something that I really believe in, is we get elected, and there's 4-year terms, and what do we do with that power while we're elected? We try our best to use our power to force government to work for you. It's what the first leader of the party has done. Tommy Douglas used his power when there was a minority government to get things done. That's what I believe in. I believe in trying to get things done. Ultimately, people chose a Liberal government. I wish they would have chosen a New Democrat government and a New Democrat Prime Minister. We would have made a lot of different choices, and we would have done things very differently. So we're going to keep on fighting with the power we have to push the government to do more. It is clear that they're not willing to do enough. It's also clear that in the next election, people have a choice. They got a choice with what we saw with Pierre Poilievre and who he really is. And people need to know. We need to go eyes wide open on who he is. He's someone that continues. This is not something that happened in 2008 and then he left it alone. His position on Indigenous people hasn't changed. He continues to show up in spaces that deny residential schools truths. He continues to allow candidates that are residential school deniers to run for his party. That's who he is. And he does not believe that Indigenous people have the right to make decisions about their own resources on their own lands. And so I reject that approach. And I want to put to you that you've got an opportunity for New Democrats who want to work with you. And so the next election is going to be very important. It's an opportunity for us to chart a new course. And I hope that that course is one where you see in me a Prime Minister and see New Democrats an ally that want to work with you and build that brighter future together.
So as we had half an hour for this agenda item, and it's already been half an hour, almost half an hour, we'll have time for mic number 2.
I'm flexible.
Okay, you can stay a little bit longer, so we might have time for more questions. We'll take 3 questions at a time. Mic number 2.
John Martin Delvezi, proxy Bemaru, good morning. My name is John Martin. I'm a proxy for Chief Larocque from the Giscabegi Mi'kmaq First Nation out on the east coast in Quebec. A question that I was going to put forward earlier, not able to, but right now, whoever forms the next government, this issue remains a concern for those of us who are involved in education. And across this country in the past few years, there's been a couple of education agreements that have been signed. Right now, from what we see happening in Ottawa and within the department, there seems to be a little bit of backing away from those agreements and wanting to go towards the downward trend. that's really a concern, because these regional education agreements have really allowed us to bring the standards of education for our children up in the community, and we're not prepared to go backwards. You know, the Indian control of Indian education policy was in 1972, and it's just now that we are getting to a standard of education for some of the communities across the country, because there are still a lot of regional education agreements to be negotiated and signed to bring the standards of education up. So definitely, whoever's in power next, you know, we want those concerns addressed. We want to keep this funding going. It needs to be indexed. It needs to continue to grow so we can maintain the standards of education for our children in the community. So that's the request for your support. I know the NDP has been there a long time and, you know, supporting us in a lot of these issues. On another issue as well, the second issue is our concern over the Languages Act and the kind of funding that's been provided. Funding that simply does not reflect the need that is there. We are in a critical situation with our languages. We're struggling to survive. And when you're in a critical situation with our languages, you have to be very careful what your next move is. You don't want to go on a downward trend. You need to go on an upward trend where languages are concerned. And I think that right now, what's there, I think needs to be doubled. I mean, 85 million across the country is simply not enough. Okay, well, audio. Thank you.
As there's still a little bit of time, Chief Daibo, you can go ahead.
Grand Chief Cody Daibo from Kahnawake. So in the spirit of fairness, I asked your predecessor, not your predecessor, your colleague, the same question. So today is the anniversary of the 1990 Oka crisis, where we still have not received an apology from Canada for marching troops on their allies. And will your government uphold the White Montour decision and oppose Vanderpeet and Sparrow going into the future?
Sorry, Grand Chief, I just missed the last part of your question.
I said, would your government uphold the White Montour decision and oppose Sparrow and Vanderpeet, keeping us frozen in time?
Chief Gary Lehman, Beaver Lake Cree Nation, Treaty 6 territory. I want to acknowledge that the two-row wampum belt was one of the original treaties, and it started right in this area. So I want to acknowledge that. Also, Jagmeet, the Treaty 1 to 11, the sacred treaties, we have a hard time having a seat with the Governor General, with the King. And these are our treaty partners, right? The Crown is our treaty partner. And we need to have a seat with the King, with the Governor General, so we can talk about our issues. It's not just the Government of Canada. You know, they hold a lot of our funding and stuff like that. But our issues are with a lot of times with the Crown. So we need to have that open dialogue with the Governor General. Access to the Governor General is very hard to get. Just one more thing. Open invitation, Treaty 1 to 11 gathering, August 26th to the 30th, Cold Lake, Alberta. You are invited. Thank you.
Okay, we will now give time to Jagmeet Singh to answer.
Thank you so much. First question was around education and the education agreements. We want to see those agreements upheld and us to move forward. I've been to many of the schools. I've been to schools across, Indigenous schools across the country, and it's clear that the funding needs to be indexed, it needs to increase, and we need to lift up the level of education in Indigenous communities, and that is the direction of those current agreements, and we want to see that accelerated and move forward. We do not want us to go backwards, so that's something that we support, and we'll continue to fight to make sure that education, those agreements continue and are upheld. In addition, the question also touched on languages, and as someone, I learned my language later on in life. My parents were nervous and a little bit embarrassed for me to speak it when I was younger, and then later on thought I should learn it. As kids, you know, kids can be very stubborn, so I didn't. But when I was in my 30s, I tried to learn my language, and I can speak really fluently now. And I can tell you it is such a powerful way to connect with where you come from and where you are. And so I really believe that for languages, this is something that has to be a priority, and it requires significant funding to keep languages alive, to support the growth of and maintenance of those languages. So I really believe this is something so fundamentally important, and my wholehearted support around languages, indigenous languages, have to be protected, have to be maintained, and have to be grown. The Oka crisis question from Grand Chief, it is a mark on our history that military was used against indigenous people in that way. It was wrong, and absolutely we should be pushing for a formal apology. I would say that anytime military police are used against indigenous people, it's wrong that way. And then the specific subject matter of the question was around the decision, which is what the crisis was all about. So I support, again, this is in light of the United Nations Declaration, my belief in free and prior consent, the ability for indigenous people to do what they want with their land and to be able to have decision-making over their land. I uphold the decisions that support your ability to do that. So of course I would be in favor of opposing the scenario that limits your ability to grow, that keeps you in, like as you put it, suspended in time. I think that is unfair and unjust. And then last question, important question. Chiefs often have a lot of knowledge around treaty and the interesting relationship that Canada has as a country where there's both, of course, the government, but then the Crown and the relationship that is with both. And specific question was about access to the Governor General, and I can see why that is an important request. It's something that I haven't actually turned my mind to, but I'm happy to look at solutions where Indigenous communities can get access to the Governor General as proxy for the Crown. So happy to look at that idea more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whatever you like. I'll be in your hands.
So we'll go on mic number 1.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My name is Kevin McKay. I carry a proxy for the Nisga'a village of Dakhazat. We belong to the Nisga'a Nation. We are 24 years into implementing BC's first modern treaty, and it's not without challenges, but still I have hope. And the reason I have hope is because all of the children born May the 11th, 2000, right up to the present time, have not had to live one day under the Indian Act. They live under their own government, the Nisga'a Nation government. So, sir, I am here today to ask for your support in upholding the implementation of BC's first modern treaty. We support the call for an independent office similar to the Auditor General that would report directly to Parliament on treaty implementation challenges. Because if Canada doesn't do that, then all of these treaty making is smoke and mirrors. Because currently, we still report to a department under the Department of Indian Affairs. We demand an independent office similar to the Auditor General. Thank you, sir.
As we started this way, we'll continue on mic number 1 again, since there's still time.
Good morning, Jagmeet. Thank you for attending our assembly. and thank you for reflecting on the basic needs of the people who live on the reserve, the need for housing and safe drinking water. Thank you for recognizing there's 28 boil water advisories outstanding in Canada. Ontario region has the majority of those boil water advisories. First Nations have been waiting decades, waiting and wondering if they can protect the health and safety of the people that live in their community because of the lack of access to safe drinking water. Urgent money is needed now, not after the election. You have the ability to, and the Prime Minister, to go to the Consolidated Revenue Fund to get additional money that's needed now to address the need for safe drinking water in Ontario and across Canada, and the urgent need for investment in housing so that people won't live in overcrowded, unsafe houses, or families with children won't be homeless. I want to know, will you do that now?
Thank you. We will go on mic number 2. We will return to mic number 1, and it will be the last question. So 2 last questions.
Good morning, Chief Andy Alec, Big Stone Cree Nation. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to meet with the First Nations people today. I want to speak on a few items, and I know that you had mentioned that we need good infrastructure. We need excellent infrastructure within the nations, but also equitable infrastructure. We see in our neighboring communities, within the municipalities, and within our provinces that our infrastructure isn't equitable. We need access to all the social determinants of health, education, housing. We need access to the data to show the disparities within our nations in comparison to our neighboring communities. We also want to know what action items are you willing to work on regardless of you getting in as our next Prime Minister. We need to be able to measure the disparities of our First Nations people, determine a path forward, and strategize in partnership with every level of government to see how we're going to improve the quality of life of our First Nations people today and tomorrow. I want to know what is going to happen when and if you get in. How are these action items going to be achieved realistically? We hear a number of times when people campaign, the promises that are broken. And they have been broken for the last few decades and the last 150 plus years. We also need to ensure that our treaties are recognized, not only at a federal level, but also at the provincial level. We need to ensure that the resources of our First Nations are being brought back for the benefit of our First Nations people. I want to know how that is going to happen. We also need to ensure that the future generations of our children are able to identify with their First Nations community. There's so many people that have been lost because of Indian residential schools in the 60s scoop. How are we going to identify our First Nations people that have lost their identity with their communities? Big Stone Cree Nation has lost so many people because of the opioid crisis as well. We have a number of houseless people, homeless people. How is the federal government going to be able to support shortage of housing when the traumas of Indian residential school are still there? We no longer need Band-Aid solutions. We need long-term sustainable funding to implement positive change for our people that are affected by the traumas that Canada had put in place. I also want to extend an invite to you to come to Treaty 8, as well as extending an invite to Big Stone Cree Nation, so you could see firsthand the disparities that we face every day as First Nations people. Thank you.
Okay, so since it's the last questions and there's still 48 seconds on this mic, we only give you this time to speak. And then we'll go over to mic 1. Microphone number 2.
Good morning, Jagmeet. Proxy Clint Peters, B'Kejwonon Territory, Walpole Island First Nation. I have a question regarding the Jay Treaty of 1794. It seems that Canada is in serious violation of not honoring this treaty. It affects our territory, it affects our people. We cannot cross freely in the border. There is no border. We should be unmolested, whether it's work, trade, school, living, whatever it is. We want answers for that. We've been fighting that for years. The fight is going to continue, and I'd like to know what your government plans on doing for this and for our community and our territory. Miigwech.
Thank you. We'll go over to microphone number 1.
I was just standing here waiting for Jagmeet to answer.
Okay.
Out of respect for him.
Okay. And we'll take the question behind you, and that will be all. Thank you.
Good morning, Raymond Fletcher Dinkath, St. Joseph's Point, Nunthe, and Shinyo Nation. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere. My community is isolated, remote area. We're planning on building an all-season road from Barons River all the way up to St. Joseph's Point. And I'm here to ask Mr. Jagmeet Singh here to advocate on our behalf. All the proposals, all the plans, the scoping study proposals have all been submitted. Everything is in there. Some options, all the options are there. We just need a yes or a no from the federal government to give us the money to start building. Also want to extend invitation to you to come to our territory. There's 4 First Nations up there on the lake. And I think it will be Damanasan, Kisimwet Kipizain. Bandawaban Taman Kaisakapisyank, Egumda United Yangut in our area. Because it's a beautiful country up there. We have proud people over there. And we live in one of the most poorest area in Canada. But when you look at the landscape, you look at the waters, everything is fresh. And we have natural resources available to us. We want to protect those. At the same time, we want to balance the economic development in our area, because we believe in being a sovereign nation. In order to be sovereign, we don't need to ask for permission from anybody. We don't need to ask the province, we don't need to ask the federal government, can we do this, can we have this? We want to be sovereign, we got to do it on our own. And you follow what we say, because you want to create our own laws. And this is going to be part of the resolution that will be coming up later on. My resolution is telling the people, the federal governments, that we want to create our own laws. When we do that, you have to honor and acknowledge and follow them, our own guideline, and because we know our land. We're from the land. So you come to our territory, we'll do business. And you also have the balance of power, because the federal government is a minority government. You can tell them, go support them. I want to support them. You have to support them. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Chief. Last speaker.
Good morning. My name is Regina Crowchild, from proxy for Chief Whitney from Tsuut'ina Nation. Mr. Jagmeet, I want to first of all thank you for willing to hear more questions, because too many times when the conservatives or the liberals come in, we're limited to a certain time and they don't even offer to stay to listen to us more. They just come in, they're just like a whirlwind. They come in and they're gone, you know, telling us sweet words, giving us sweet words, and we have to read between the lines and know what they are, what their intents are. So I want to
Can we put can we put 3 minutes on the timer? Can we put 3 minutes on the timer, please?
What?
Thank you.
Are you taking up my time?
No, I'm sorry. I'm putting you more time. Okay. I'm putting you more time, sorry.
So we know the NDP has never been in government. It's always been the Conservatives and the Liberals. And today, but I do know that NDP makes agreements with the Liberals or who they're going to support on with certain conditions that benefits your party, like pharmacare and other stuff. And they need, both parties need your support to get what they want. So whoever you side with tends to get their legislations in and approved. So I'm asking you, the Liberal Party has been trying to get rid of our international treaties. They're not trying, they're in the process. They talk about the Indian Act, which they're going to get rid of, and yes, that Indian Act stripped our people of their authority as sovereign nations. It did. So now the Liberal Party, Trudeau, is saying, oh, I want to do a great thing, I want to get rid of the Indian Act. But in the meantime, he's recolonizing us, keeping us subordinate to the Canadian government through other policies like the Land Management Act, you know, which is going to make our lands fee simple. They give us 10-year agreements with no guarantee after 10 years to look after the promises of treaty that the Canadian federal government has, that the Imperial Crown gave them. We're not here to look for handouts. We are here, just wait, we are here to look and make sure that our peoples prosper. Our peoples live in poverty, and you know that very well. So what are you going to do to help us that Canada can quit recolonizing us and ensure that there'll always be Indians? We are, oh, I know you're a real Indian, but anyway, us Indians, Red Indians, us Red Indians, as they call us, that will always be here and will always have our territories for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. Right now, Canada's trying to do away with that. So,
thank you, Miigwech. Thank you.
Wait, one more sentence. You're just taking up my time. One more sentence.
You have your 4 minutes.
What are you going to do to help us for Canada to live according to the spirit and intent of our international treaties with the Imperial Crown, which Canada has no business interfering with? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much. It was worth sticking around, I got to tell you. First off, I know that the chief who asked that question wanted to stay standing to receive the answer, so I appreciate the honor that you're giving me, but I can still respond to the first question, or sorry, the second question. But the first question was about the Niska Nation. I think that there's a lot of good that's being done around the modern treaties. I think this is could be a very potentially powerful step forward. But the question was, the treaty could be good, but it's about the implementation. And if the implementation is not there, then it really takes away from the potential good. So the question was around my support for the implementation of the treaty. Yes, full support for that. But specifically the question was, the way it's structured is that even if it's a modern treaty, you still have to work with the minister who is governed underneath the Indian Act, and that's undermining all of that. So I hear you on that. And so the call was, could there be a different, or a demand was for a different system to go directly to an independent office like the Auditor General's that doesn't sit underneath the Indian Act. I think that's a really good solution. I haven't looked at that specifically, but I think it makes a lot of sense that if you're a modern treaty, you don't want to then have to go back to working within an Indian Act structure. So I see the argument there, and I'm happy to work on a solution that doesn't make you have to go under the same system that you want to be separate from under modern treaty. So I hear you on that. This is the question that the chief had waited. The second question was the chief wanted to hear the answer and was standing there. I appreciate that respect. It was around acknowledging that the housing and water are issues, but what am I going to do to push for it now? And I think it's a very good question that, of course, I want to be the next Prime Minister to make these decisions with the full power of government, but I'm not going to wait until then. And so right now we are pushing the government to move on housing, to move on water, and we are using the leverage we have to push them to act right now, to get money flowing right now. So we are doing that, and we're going to keep, oh, there you are, Chief. And we're going to keep on doing that. So you're right. It's not, we don't have to wait till the next election. We're pushing for that now and using the power that we have to try to get results now. Next question was on equitable funding and also data. The Chief was really concerned about not just good infrastructure, but excellent infrastructure and equitable infrastructure. Maybe people remember the question that I was posed about water, and someone said, well, how much is it going to cost? What if it costs too much? And I said, well, you wouldn't ask that question if we were talking about clean water in Montreal or clean water in Vancouver or in Toronto. Same with infrastructure. You wouldn't ask that question. So I agree that it should be equitable infrastructure. And it means that giving the first people of this land a fair shot at building a bright future, you have to have equitable infrastructure that's equal to the communities around them, and acknowledges that in some cases, if it's been so bad for so long, we have to make bigger investments in. So this is something I believe in, and I've been constantly pushing for that. The other question was around data to make better decisions and to point out the impacts being not equitable, and having better data to show that the outcomes are different. I think that's a very good point. We need to be able to have good data to show that the outcomes are unfair, and so I support ways to get better data. And then the last two were acknowledging the trauma of residential schools. Absolutely, that trauma is still being impacted, or still being felt today, the impacts. And some of the solutions were long-term sustainable funding. I agree. That's one of the major solutions, working with First Nations, long-term sustainable funding to address the trauma. The specific question by another chief was on the 1794 treaty, and that there's violations going on. I'm not familiar with that specific treaty, but I'm happy to work with any nation that's being impacted by violations of treaty rights in ways that I can advocate to be a champion to support your call. I think you were particularly concerned about free movement, particularly over borders, and that treaty is being violated. Happy to work with you on that issue. There was a chief asking a question specifically for Teresa Point about advocating for a road. These are type of issues that we've been pushing for. Recently, we pushed for funding for a hospital in Northern Ontario that was long promised but not delivered. We were able to get that funding. It's helping primarily Indigenous communities. So happy to push for projects like that. A lot of communities that are right now isolated could have a road built, and they could be connected to other communities. I think we need to be doing more of that work. So happy to look at that project. Last question was, this was by Regina Crowchild. Very powerful. I feel like another round of applause for the lots of great points that were raised. And Regina Crowchild acknowledged that I waited. I've been to AFNs in the past, AFN assemblies, and I know how important it is for you to have your voices heard. And so sometimes I may not have all the answers, but I definitely have to hear the questions so I can at least reflect on them and think about them. And so while I give a speech, I hope my speech has weight, I also know hearing from you is maybe even more important. So that's why I try to give it as much time as possible. And I told my team to allow for flexibility after the speech, knowing that there might be more questions. So I make that a request, or I make that a demand, that I need to have a flexible schedule after the speech in case there's more questions, so that I can spend the time with you. I think all leaders should do that. I think they know very well that the chiefs will have questions, and so I make sure that that's a commitment to try to give you as much time as possible. So thank you for acknowledging that, Regina Crowchild. Your question was around a lot of important points, international treaties, using our power in this agreement and using it in the future, questions about the Indian Act stripping authority from Indigenous communities, and what I'm going to do. I think there was a lot in that question, and so I think it might be another 20-minute speech about how I could respond to all those things. But I think fundamentally, like, just how do we solve any of the problems? I think treating Indigenous communities as equal partners, working together, shoulder to shoulder, not demanding or putting pressures or acting like Ottawa knows all. I think that's the approach to any of these solutions. Any of these problems can be solved with working with Indigenous communities together, true nation-to-nation relationship, hearing from you in terms of what the solutions are, and moving in a way that is respectful, is collaborative. That's the approach. I think it's the spirit that we have to challenge these problems. Approach it with that spirit, and that's what I want to do. I want to approach it with that spirit, that intention. I've seen the federal government very close. I say the closest of anyone that's not in government. I've seen the way they work, and I know there's so many solutions. There's so much that can be done if you've got the will. And that's what I have. I have the will. I am not satisfied with just moving along slowly. I want to use everything I can to push for quick action, and so I'm going to continue to do that. And that's the spirit I approach all these problems. I care deeply, as my mom taught me, that we are all one. So I care deeply about the challenges you're up against, and I want to be an ally, and I want to work with you. So thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup au chef.
Thank you very much to the NDP, to the Chief of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you, everyone, for those good conversations, those good comments. And now we're going to get into the business side of resolutions. We just have a few announcements, too. There is available at distribution a proposed omnibus packages cheat sheet, let's call it. So this is just so that you guys can know what's coming up during the day. As is the tradition here, we try to get through as many as we can, so we will be getting to these pretty rapidly. This cheat sheet is available at distribution, and if ever there are amendments that you would like to propose on any of these resolutions, it would be a great help if you can head over to the Resolutions Committee and already get that language to them so that we can roll through the process more efficiently. For now, we will be going to our draft resolution as revised. For revised draft resolution 58, and also I've just been handed a note saying that there are still single resolutions such as the one we are doing now. So it is not just omnibuses, these are just the proposed packages. So we can head to revised draft resolution number 58 for my technicians. Thank you very much. And before we get to this, I think it's important to note that there was 2 opposing language resolutions included in the resolutions package. Draft resolutions number 57 and 58. But over the week, the technicians, the chiefs, have been working together to find language that will bring together a common language and a consensus approach for funding allocation formula. And this is what we have in front of us now. The hard work brought to consensus for draft resolution as revised number 58. We have as mover Cookby Fred Robbins, so I will look to see if Cookby Fred Robbins is with us. We have Cookby Fred Robbins, thank you. And we had as a seconder Proxy Paula Acus. Do we have our seconder that side? Thank you very much. Thank you for the heads up. So we do have both our mover and seconder, so I will go on to read, therefore be it resolved. Thank you, technicians. So therefore be it resolved for draft resolution 58, First Nations languages, regional allocation formula. Therefore be it resolved 1, call on the Government of Canada to fulfill their legislative requirements through the Indigenous Languages Act, ILA, to provide long-term sustainable funding that reflects the actual cost to reclaim, revitalize, maintain, protect, and strengthen First Nations languages as determined by First Nations. 2, call on the Assembly of First Nations, AFN, to file a complaint with the Office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages, OCIL, regarding chronically inadequate funding and misalignment with the principles and objectives of the ILA. 3, call on AFN Legal to provide an analysis, including recommendations on a potential Canadian human rights complaint on the ongoing and historical chronic underfunding of First Nations languages, language reclamation and revitalization resulting in their further endangerment of First Nations languages. 4, call on the AFN to continue to work on gathering data on the Regional Allocation Formula, RAF, factors outlined in the AFN's First Nations Languages funding model in full partnership with the Technical Committee on Languages, TCOL, to develop an evidence-based approach to the RAF supported by a national data collection strategy and presented to the Chiefs Committee on Languages, CCOL, and Technical Committee on Languages for review and future co-development as soon as possible, but no later than 2 years. 5, direct the AFN to host a facilitated 2-day strategic planning session with the TCOL and CCOL to discuss long-term objectives to support future co-development, including a discussion on national data collection and a funding strategy for the development of a RISE languages funding formula within 6 months. The CCOL and TCOL will reconvene after a framework is developed to further discuss the formula. 6, affirm that a co-development approach concerning First Nations languages is not intended to detract or hinder any self-government process or derogate from any existing First Nations treaty and inherent rights. 7, call on the Government of Canada to implement the commonly approved interim funding approach over 2 years, as agreed upon by the CCOL by consensus on July 10, 2024. 8, call on the Government of Canada to work with First Nations to reallocate any unused funds from the above-mentioned formula as applied to Budget 2024 over 2 years to ensure they are distributed to regions able to allocate the funds in a timely manner, and priority will be given to those regions with the greatest need. And the final, therefore, be resolved. 9, call on the Government of Canada to redistribute any unused funds from the OCIL to the ILC to support First Nations community-led language initiatives. So we have read the therefore be it resolved into the minutes. And I would now move over to our mover, Cook Fred Robbins, for opening comments. You would have 4 minutes on microphone 2, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to also acknowledge whose territory we're on. Thank them for allowing us to be here today as nations. I also want to thank our opening prayer to get us started off in a good way. I speak as the Chief Representative of the Chiefs Committee on Languages as the mover of this resolution. It has been a long journey to get to this point. I'm proud to say that our technical representatives and our chiefs have worked over the last two days to find a path forward on a regional allocation formula for our language revitalization. The journey's been challenging, but the resolve that our committee has demonstrated to find the interim solution has shown the power of census-driven decision-making by our leadership and our committee. We all agree to give a little, take a little. While this formula in no means is perfect, it is a temporary solution to a long-term strategy. To come together in good faith and determine a better path forward for the long term. In the meantime, we have important work to do as chiefs. The resolution is about more than a formula. It's about holding the government accountable to its legal obligations to fund our languages to a level that ensures that they are revitalized, reclaimed in honor of our ancestors and future generations. This resolution is about agreeing to our frustrations aren't about the pennies that the government has thrown at us to fight for. The government thrives when our nations are held divided, But over the past 2 years of negotiations, language funding has drastically reduced for all of our regions, despite Indigenous Language Act passing in 2019. This resolution is about demanding that Canada upholds the UN Declaration and its legal obligation outlined in the Indigenous Language Act to ensure that all of our regions are equitably funded moving forward. I know each region isn't thrilled with the individual outcome of this formula, but I remind chiefs that we all had to compromise to move forward. I call on all chiefs to support this resolution and the good work of the chiefs and the Technical Committee on Language and the important work in front of us. I also ask the resolution table to ensure that the translation not be lost from English to French and French to English. Mr. Chair, it has been quite some time since our languages across Canada have been acknowledged. And in the BC region, we have languages that are near extinct. And we need the support of this funding so that we can revitalize that for future generations. For far too long, the federal government has been holding ISK. It's so frustrating having to beat First Nations in our territory, asking the federal government for support, when in the long run, as First Nations, all the resources and the extractions, and I thank Little Child for speaking out about this, but where is the fairness when it comes to the billions of dollars that the federal government receives from tax dollars from our lands? So I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and I ask that there be no friendly amendments to this resolution. We will be bringing it back in Winnipeg. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Cook P. Robbins. I would now look towards our seconder, Proxy Acous, to address. You have 4 minutes. Microphone 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to start by acknowledging Chief Ira MacArthur for his devotion to the languages. Coming from a Nakota First Nation, we understand and appreciate the importance of language revitalization. This draft resolution is a result of clear direction given by the First Nations in Assembly to the Chiefs Committee on Languages and the Technical Committee on Languages. The regional allocation formula proposed by this draft resolution applies to a new funding from Canadian Heritage for the next 2 years. Importantly, this draft resolution begins to address the concern that Canadian Heritage previous regional allocation formula was developed without duly consulting the rights holders in all the regions. The previous formula did not have the collective consent of all the regions. This draft resolution calls for steps to be taken to fully resolve this issue and ensure that the rights holders of all regions are provided with free, prior, and informed consent on this important issue of language revitalization. First Nations have the right and obligation to ensure the Crown upholds its duty to consult. When First Nations' right to free, prior, and informed consent is not upheld, it endangers First Nations' rights across all sectors and all regions. What is missing in this draft resolution and from Canadian Heritage programs is a focus on core funding for language revitalization. It has been 5 years since the Indigenous Language Act was passed in 2019, and the Canadian Heritage plans to maintain a proposal-driven approach for its Indigenous language revitalization funding until 2028. This is not right and does not align with the commitments made to the rights holders and grassroots people who strive to uphold our languages. The consensus during the consultation for the Language Act was to provide our communities with core-based language revitalization funding. First Nations must be directly provided with the core-based funding needed to achieve language revitalization. We will not revitalize our languages with proposal-based funding. Our communities must have core-based language revitalization funding. This draft resolution is only one small step towards achieving a future where all of our communities flourish, all of our languages flourish in all of our communities. I ask for your support for this resolution, and I support the mover's request for no friendly amendments. Miigwech.
Thank you, Proxy Akus. So we'll now be going into our discussion period. I see Chief Martin or Proxy Martin at microphone number 2. Microphone number 2, please.
John Martin Delvisi, Proxy Bemadu, Chitsama, White Roderick Lavac. Good morning. My name is John Martin from the Gaskabeya First Nation, and I'm proxy for Chief Larac for Gaskabeya. Just like to state that First Nations languages are actually the first official languages of the land. And I think that's an important acknowledgement to make, and we always make that point, especially when you come from the Quebec region. And in the Quebec region, more particularly, we are certainly under duress with regards to the preservation of our languages. The Minister of Justice in Quebec maintains policies and refuses to recognize that the policies and laws in Quebec have quite a significant impact on the preservation of our languages. And I think the policies of colonization continue. They're quite healthy in Quebec and in other places as well. As a result, our languages are in a very critical state. And anytime that you find yourself in a critical state, I think it's important to take stock and make an assessment of where you are and what your next move is going to be. So I'm here basically to support this, this resolution. The resolution speaks to the Language Act. I think it's a step in the right direction. Maybe didn't go far enough, but certainly the financial resources are not there. If this act is going to get anywhere or accomplish the objectives that it's supposed to accomplish, you need a full tank of gas to get to destination. And right now we have a quarter of a tank of gas. And with the cuts that are being made, well, they just punctured a hole in that tank. So it's going to be very hard to get to destination until we're able to turn that around. So that's really a concern. You know, a little bit over $30 million to divide right across the country. You know, 10 provinces, the territories is insufficient. So I think that, you know, the Assembly of First Nations needs to mobilize politically, you know, be on the ground. There's a solid plan that needs to be put in place. I believe the resolution also speaks to that, having a proper plan in place to be able to strengthen the Language Act and secure the resources that are needed to really address the issue of our languages in the community. Right now we are, there's an interim formula that's been agreed to. We've managed to come to agreement on that. Nobody's happy about it. We realize because there is insufficient dollars. So obviously, you know, people had to make sacrifices and important sacrifices, you know. And this is felt in our region. We have 2 colonial languages that we have to deal with. So anything we do is triple, right? So that's really difficult. With regards to the formula, any formula that may come out of this, that you know, it should be a formula that leaves no language behind. Every language is important, and you know, I support this resolution as presented today, and I thank the good work that was done by the Technical Committee on Languages and the Chiefs Committee on Languages. Walali Olmsted one. Thank you.
Walalin Chief, or Walalin Proxy Martin. I will look towards our microphones, see if we have any additional speakers before going to the vote. I see we still have someone on microphone number 2. Chief Denny.
Chief Lieutenant Escazona First Nation. I just want to fully support this resolution, and I just want to commend our committee of all regions across the country that we work together diligently in unity to come together and brought this resolution to a consensus. And I just want to commend, as chair of the Language Committee, I just want to commend all our committee members and our technician team for coming together, and I just want to ask for a round of applause for our team.
Thank you, Chief Denny. So final look around the room to see if we have someone who would like to address Draft Resolution 58 as revised, First Nations languages, regional allocation formula. Question has been called. We will now proceed to a vote. Is anyone opposed to Draft Resolution 58 as revised, First Nations languages, regional allocation formula? Do we have any opposition? Seeing none, we have one opposition. Does anyone abstain? We have one abstention. So Draft Resolution 58, as revised, First Nations languages regional allocation formula is adopted by majority. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so now we will introduce an omnibus package on fisheries. Five draft resolutions are combined in this omnibus package. First one today. Fisheries, so we will introduce draft resolution number 18, 19. Minor amendments have been made in this draft resolution 19, then 20, 21, 22. So on that, we will first, you know the process, but we will first read all the titles of these five draft resolutions. I will then verify if the mover and the seconder of this omnibus package are present in the room, and we will then read all therefore be it resolved sections of these five draft resolutions, and we will then open the floor for discussions. Okay, on that, let's read the first one, draft resolution number 18. Entitled First Nations Inclusion in the Transformation of the Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation. The next draft resolution titled Draft Resolution number 19, First Nations Continued Inclusion in Canada's Oceans Protection Plan and Marine Safety Emergency Planning. Next resolution, please. Number 20, entitled 2024 Fisheries Act 5-year review to ensure alignment with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Next, please. Draft resolution number 21 entitled First Nations Wild Atlantic Salmon Conservation Approaches. Draft resolution number 22, the last one on this in this package, entitled Treaty Protected Rights Based Katik, Katu, Glass, Eel, Fishery Governance. This omnibus package has been moved by Chief Dalton Silver. Dalton Silver, are you present in the room? Good morning, Chief. So thank you. Mover is there. It has been seconded by Chief Gerald Tony. Are you present in the room, Chief Tony? You're the seconder? No change? Okay. Thank you very much. Microphone number 1, so seconder is present as well. Okay, so now, what about a bit of reading in French this morning? I'm sure you're all more than happy with that decision of mine. So, on that, let's read the first one. Alors, il s'agit du projet de résolution.
So it's draft resolution number 18.
Thank you. So, le numéro 18. Alors,
Draft resolution number 18. Therefore, be it resolved that the First Nations in Assembly direct the Assembly of First Nations to develop an advocacy strategy to support First Nations inland fishers who are seeking full control of their own commercial fisheries and business models. 2. I said full control. It may have sounded like plant control, but I said full control. 2. Direct the AFN to support the National Fisheries Committee and their technicians in monitoring the interprovincial working group comprising Indigenous fishery organizations interested in acquiring the Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation. 3. Direct the AFN to monitor the status of the transformation of the FMC and report back to the National Fisheries Committee annually. The next draft resolution, number 19. Therefore, be it resolved that the First Nations in Assembly direct the Assembly of First Nations, subject to the availability of adequate financial resources, to collaborate with Transport Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the Canadian Coast Guard to assess First Nations partnerships under the Oceans Protection Plan with respect to capacity, co-development, co-design, co-delivery, and co-governance. 2. Direct the AFN, subject to the availability of adequate financial resources, to collaborate with Transport Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the Canadian Coast Guard to address funding needs, i.e. flexible arrangements, core and long-term capacity funding for First Nations in areas and regions relevant to the OPP. 3. Call on the AFN to advocate that any legislative, regulatory, policy, and program reform related to the OPP must respect First Nations' inherent rights, treaties, title, and jurisdiction, and must recognize First Nations' inherent and everlasting responsibilities to their traditional territories. For paragraph 4 was added, so I want to call your attention to that. We'll read it together. Number 4, call on the AFN to fully support the efforts of First Nations by working with the Government of Canada, calling on the Government of Canada to work with First Nations to develop adequate regional strategies that meet the unique needs of First Nations so as to avoid the loss of livelihood of First Nations practicing their traditional way of life in their traditional waters. Draft resolution number 20. Therefore, be it resolved that the First Nations Assembly call on the Government of Canada to properly fund the engagements needed for First Nations full engagement and collaboration and consultation in the statutory 5-year review of the Fisheries Act in alignment with Action Plan Measure 38.
Well, in consultation with the government, direct the with the intention to implement the modifications that would allow us to attain the goals of the United Nations Declaration of Rights and Indigenous Peoples. To direct the AFN to engage with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and propose amendments to enable the Fisheries Acts to be legal instrument for the proper recognition and affirmation of inherent and treaty-protected rights-based fisheries, in addition to the protection and conservation of marine and coastal waters. Next, draft resolution number 21. Project 21, therefore be it resolved that direct the Assembly of the First Nations to advocate for the Government of Canada to provide adequate funding and resources to the First Nations and the Atlantic and Quebec regions to fully engage with the DFO to implement First Nations conservation strategies, engage in the Atlantic salmon conservation policy and strategy, and to ensure the respect of First Nations inherent and treaty rights. 2, to call on the AFN to advocate that Fisheries and Oceans Canada ensure that the Atlantic salmon conservation policy and strategy are consistent with the support of the objectives of the United Nations Declarations of Rights on Indigenous Peoples, and that engagement meets consultation and collaboration requirements in the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Number 3, direct the AFN to work with the DFO to ensure that the findings from the WASCP, WSCS engagement processes are shared with the First Nations. Ultimately, number 4, to direct the AFN to advocate for necessary changes to the Fisheries Act to ensure respect for the First Nation approaches to fisheries stewardship and wild Atlantic salmon conservation. Draft resolution number 22. 1. Support all Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey First Nations in their public statement regarding their treaty and Aboriginal rights to participate in the Katu glass eel fishery and the right to develop governance, fisheries management, and related science and Indigenous knowledge systems to support the sustainable, right-based harvesting. The entirety of these draft resolutions on fisheries was proposed, rather submitted and entered in the registry. We'll now open the floor for discussions and invite the mover.
If the mover wishes to introduce this omnibus package on fisheries, you have up to 4 minutes. Thank you very much. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm a lot shorter than 4 minutes, I believe. I think there was an amendment to number 19 that added a number 4, and I talked with the seconder, and we are totally in agreement with that. But on number 20, the resolution, the title reads at the top, to ensure alignment with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and actually we would propose, and we agreed to amend that to read United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People
period. The reason being the Act refers to federal legislation that is not totally implemented, and we want it to be consistent with the rights. And I think, you know, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just want to make sure that what is the draft resolution number we're talking about at this moment, and where?
The first one was 19 at the bottom of, and I think it was up on the screen already. There was an amendment on the therefore it be it resolved to add a number 4, which would be inclusive of freshwater. Yes.
Okay. And does that wording reflect what you just mentioned? Are you okay with that wording already included in this draft resolution number 19?
Yes, marine and inland waters is what we're looking at. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
On resolution number 20, on the title, it says to align with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and we would just like to take the word act off of there. So that's reflective of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, period. For a few reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure that the seconder is okay with that as well. And this way, I will also ask if you could state your name. I don't think we got it properly, so it will be the perfect occasion to do so. Microphone number 1, please.
Good morning. Tyler Sack, proxy for Chief Gerald Toney, Annapolis Valley First Nation. The proposed amendments are acceptable.
Thank you very much, Chief. Would you like to speak on that matter before opening the floor for other chiefs and proxies that wish to speak on that omnibus package? Over to you. Microphone number 1.
Well, Alwyn, as mentioned, I'm Tyler Sack, proxy for Chief Gerald Toney of Annapolis Valley First Nation in Nova Scotia, who is the co-lead chief for fisheries for the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs, and our region's representative on the Chiefs Committee on Fisheries, who's seconding the omnibus packages. Harvesting is a right that we all share. He wanted to outline that we should take great interest in protecting that right, ensuring that our people have access to economic opportunities related to our fisheries, and that our resources are managed according to our own ways, our knowledge, and principles. In addition to seconding the omnibus package, he's also seconding or moving on Resolution 21 that outlines the conservation measures to protect Atlantic salmon as our resource. And seconder on resolution number 22. These species are significant to our culture and our nation, and they're significant, and we've been removed from the process of co-managing and co-governing that resource. We believe that this is a way to support the self-determination over those and reconnect our people with those ways of life, ultimately supporting sovereignty and self-governance. The DFO have proven to us, species after species, that conservation management and governance mechanisms continue to put our species at risk rather than conserve them. We know how to best manage our resources and how to ensure fair and safe access for all of our harvesters through governance systems rooted in our traditional structures and knowledge. We support these resolutions as they are important to advancing our rights and protecting our resources. Walaliok.
Miigwech, Chief. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite other chiefs to come and speak and address the Assembly. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hugh Breaker, proxy for Chief Kenneth Watts of Sashaat First Nation. I'm going to propose 2 amendments. On motion number 19, let me say in advance that the federal government has given a large grant to the Métis to assess effects on Aboriginal fishing rights and developments in the ocean. They have no rights there. They're not even from BC. So I'd like a number 4.
But but I think it's very important. I hear too much noise there, so please, if you could keep your side conversations maybe outside the room or very quietly, silently, because it's disturbing a bit here. So thank you very much. And Chief, could you please specify again which draft resolution you propose an amendment to?
This first one is for resolution number 19. I'd like a number 4, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't type it out. I didn't realize there was an omnibus on fishing. In any event, number 4, that funding to assess ocean protection, shipping, and development in the oceans on Aboriginal rights go only to the title and rights holders.
Thank you, Chief. So the Resolution Committee will come and see you to make sure they have the correct language. We will update the Google Drive, the draft resolution, and we will come back on that. So does that complete your intervention on the floor? Okay, so over to you.
One more, Madam Chair. The problem we have, the Fraser River is one of the largest fisheries bodies in Canada. It provides fish for more than 80 or 90 First Nations in British Columbia, and they are planning 6 major developments at least on the mouth of the Fraser, rebuilding the tunnel on Highway 99, putting in a major wastewater treatment facility in the south arm of the Fraser, rebuilding Patullo Bridge, expanding Roberts Bank Superport, and I've forgotten 2 more. The problem is the First Nations are not getting funding to assist in the assessment of those and their effect on their Aboriginal rights, and I'd like that funding to go to them. So it would be number 4 in motion 20. It would say provide adequate funding to the First Nation title and rights holders on the Fraser River to assess the effect of major developments in the lower Fraser. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So draft resolution. Resolution Committee will work this out with you, and we will come back for that. So at this moment, microphone number 2, the speakers list is closed on that microphone. We will come back on the 2 proposed amendments. And now I invite microphone number 1, please. Over to you.
Vera Mitchell, Chief Poilievre in Manitoba. I support the resolutions, despite the fact that they're very ambiguous and not to the point. And I want to make some comments regarding fisheries. It was a very big mistake when Department of Fisheries and Oceans decided to clump the inland fisheries and the coastal fisheries together. And I have to say that AFN has always put fisheries in the back burner. I quit trying to call AFN on behalf of my fishermen because there is no strategy, no organization, and no resources whatsoever to First Nations to try and discuss fisheries and strategize. And we're feeling that in our inland fisheries in Manitoba, that because we don't have the resources, that everybody's all over the place. And fishermen in our region depend on fishing as a livelihood to support their families. And we have so much challenges in regards to all the garbage that's in our lake, the pollution. It's really hard to be a fisherman, a commercial fisherman in our region. So I'm just reaching out to AFN to put more emphasis on assisting our fishermen, both in the inland and the coastal. I can't speak for the coastal fishermen, but I just want to share that There is nothing at AFN, and let's get our priorities straight and support our fishermen that are trying to make a living. Thank you.
Miigwech, Chief. So the speaker's list is now closed. We will come back on the proposed amendments that were discussed on the floor, and I will ask Encore to please put up on the screen draft resolution number 19, and we will go to the therefore be it resolved section number 5. And we will read it, and I will then ask the chief at the microphone to make sure this paragraph 5 does reflect his proposed wording. Okay, so we will read it together. So, direct the AFN to advocate that funding to assess ocean protection and marine shipping and development in the ocean go only to the title and rights holders. So the chief that proposed that amendment made a thumbs up, so that confirms that this language reflects what he proposes to add. And now I'm going to ask the mover. Is the mover in agreement with that proposed amendment? Microphone number 2, please.
Yes, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Seconder, microphone number 1, please.
Yes, in agreement.
Thank you, Proxy. So, draft resolution 19 has been amended. Technicians, if you could please put up on the screen draft resolution number 20, and we will go to therefore be it resolved number 4. We will read it together. So, 4, direct the AFN to advocate to the federal government to provide adequate funding to First Nations rights and title holders on the Lower Fraser River for major developments. Does that? Yes, thank you. So that reflects the language there reflects the proposed amendment. So thank you very much. And I am now looking at the mover to see if he does agree with this proposed amendment. Microphone number 2, please.
Only slightly, and I talked with Amir, who's typing it up, but provide adequate funding to First Nations rights and title holders on the Lower Fraser River for addressing major developments.
So one word added, to be added. Perfect. I got a confirmation from the chief that proposed that amendment. He's also perfectly okay with that. Thank you so much. I will now look at microphone number 1. Are you okay, mover? Seconder, are you okay with this proposed amendment?
Yes, all good.
Thank you so much. So draft resolution number 20 has been amended. Anything else? This completes our discussion period on this omnibus package number 1 for today on fisheries. So draft resolutions in this omnibus package. It's omnibus package number 3, but it's the first for today, but it's number 3 on fisheries. It contains 5 draft resolutions. 18, 19 has been amended, 20 as amended, 21 and 22. Perfect. Thank you so much. And now, chiefs and proxies, I will call the question, and I will look at the floor to see if there is any opposition to this omnibus package number 3 on fisheries. Any opposition? If you wish to oppose to that omnibus package on fisheries, please raise up your red lanyard. I don't see any opposition. None. Any abstention in the room? I don't see any abstention in the room. So I now declare this omnibus package number 3 on on fisheries, including draft resolution 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 as amended, has been carried by consensus. Congratulations to you all. Thank you so much. So on that, I will now turn the floor over to National Chief. Over to you, National Chief.
Well, thank you, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I know there's lots of work to do, but of course, legally, we're always told to do one thing over another. And chiefs, over the past many assemblies, you have passed resolutions wanting a deal done on child welfare, and late last night, as we discussed in camera, we couldn't talk to it publicly. We can now after I officially do this. But late last night, I want to thank the executive as well. I know standing here, and there's many others that are in support. I know that there's lots of work that has went into it, and all of us as a team have done that for you. You've directed us to go and get a deal out of Canada. You've pushed us over and over again to continue to negotiate in a good way, stay at the negotiating table, and get the work done for you. And late last night, finally, legal things aren't easy from time to time. It's sometimes even just one word is a different thing, right? So all of the different parties had to go through that, and late last night, we are pleased. And I want to, before going into that, I just want to say that I want to thank our former National Chief, Joanna Bernard, for all your hard work on this, the executive, Grand Chief Fiddler, Miigwech, Chief Joel Abram, Bobby Narcisse, Abram Benedict, and everybody in this assembly for getting us to this point. And negotiations can be tough. Dealing with the Prime Minister's office and cabinet, all of us banging on those doors, we've done this together, and so we are pleased to announce that, and you will have the draft in front of you later today for you to tell us in September what if you want this or not. And that's the only thing that I want to do for you as National Chief, is I'm going to take your direction. I've been following them to this date, and it never wavered on that, on my commitment to each of you chiefs. We are pleased to announce that we have secured a commitment from the Government of Canada to provide a groundbreaking $47.8 billion in funding over the next 10 years for the necessary reforms outlined in the final settlement agreement. There will be the minister is on her way, and there will be a special press conference on the negotiated commitment at noon today with Grand Chiefs and Minister Patty Haidu, as well as our executive, on the long-term form measures for the First Nations Child and Family Services Program. The settlement will be distributed to chiefs today for your review and your feedback prior to the Special Chiefs Assembly in September, where I get direction from you, not from agencies, not from AFN, not from staff, not from anybody else, but from chiefs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this great announcement. So on that, just want to remind you all that the press conference is not here. It's in the press conference room. I will ask my co-chair, Cedric. No, where is confirm the room once again. So it's at noon. The press conference is at noon, and in the press conference room. I don't have the exact number, but in the press conference room. So congratulations to you all. On that, we will continue to do business and deal with resolutions. So on that, I will turn the floor over to my colleague. Colleagues? I think they are negotiating. Hopefully it's not a race, because the day is not finished, and we have some more work to be done right now. So Véronique, I think Cedric did good in negotiations, and Véronique is now the chair for this next omnibus package. Thank you so much, everyone. Good work.
Okay, so we're now on the omnibus package on environment. I will try and get the mic right. Okay. So I will read all of the titles of the resolutions that are included in this package. So draft resolution number 50, 2024, advocating for an ambitious, fully funded and implemented First Nations climate leadership agenda. Draft resolution 51, 2024, First Nation participation in the development of a right to a healthy environment implementation framework and environmental justice strategy. Draft resolution 52, 2024, full and effective participation of First Nations in Canada's nature agenda. Draft resolution 54, participation of First Nations in the development of an international legally binding plastic treaty. Draft resolution 55, removing impacts and reasserting First Nations jurisdiction and authority in carbon pollution pricing. Draft resolution 64, 2024, protection of the Bathurst caribou herd. And the last one of the package, draft resolution 67, 2024, support the Dene First Nation to address contamination from the Exxon Imperial or Limited Curl mine site. So we have 7 draft resolutions. There are some that are revised. So draft resolution 51 is revised, as well as 52, 54, and that's all. I will now present the mover and the seconder. So the mover is Chief Biron Louis from Okanagan Indian Band on mic 2. And also the seconder is Chief Terry Richardson of Papineau First Nations, and we will not take any. We will not present the omnibus right now. So there was a change, a quick change. I will pass the floor to Wina.
Thank you so much, Véronique. And this is the life of a co-chair. And we need to adapt. We need to be always ready for a change. And that's what we are doing right now. And I thank you, Chief. So I know you wanted to speak to that matter, but we just pause the dealing of this this omnibus package. And we will come back on that. So it has been moved, seconded, and it's going to be read and entered into the record just after lunch. Because on that, we will have an announcement by, another announcement by National Chief at this moment. And we will have some announcement also to make before going to lunch. And on that, since I have some time, I'm going to let you know that the Circle of Trade will close today at 1 p.m. So if you still want to make some nice gift or purchases, or you would need to go before 1 today. Today we will end this day around 4 with our closing protocols. So we will some draft resolution will hit the floors this afternoon as well. So we will continue to the work this afternoon. And I still remind you that there's a press conference at noon in the press conference room. And I'm waiting for support on the stage. Okay, so we need the drum group. So Eagle River Singer, are you available, Larry? I don't know if you're there, but we would need the River Singer, Eagle River Singers, if possible. But on that, en fait-tu le blanketing? Veux-tu le dire? Parce que là, veux-tu le faire? Okay. And on that, I will turn the floor over to Cedric. Cedric will be the one to announce what is coming right now. Thank you so much. So we needed the Eagle River Singers for that part of the day, and I'm so sorry to make you wait. We're trying to figure this out, but at this moment, I will now take, okay, I am going now to announce the lunch. So we'll have a lunch. We'll come back here at 1 p.m., Cedric? Veronique? 1 p.m.? 1 p.m. here, back in the room. Please be there, chiefs and proxies. We have resolutions to discuss and to vote, so we need quorum. We need you in the room. And we will continue with Veronique and the omnibus package on what? And on environment. So have a great lunch, everyone. Circle of Trade closes at 1. We'll come back at 1. See you all this afternoon, 1 p.m. sharp. Thank you very much.